Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Conversate with Pamela. Yes, I am doing something that is it's much needed, and we're going to be sitting today. Actually, you did see the topic of domestic violence awareness. I have some amazing panelists coming on here that you will hear their story. I wanted to first and foremost welcome everybody if this is a sensitive topic, but if you have any questions, please drop them in the feed. We will definitely discuss the questions here. This is all about bringing awareness and talking about domestic violence. If you have anything, if you would like to even come on and join and talk to us, that is more than welcome. I'm your host, Pamela Stone, with Conversate with Pamela. But tonight we're going to do a little different. We're coming on with At the Table, and we're bringing on some amazing women who have gone through and has faced domestic violence. So let me first bring on our first guest, who is Miss Sherry Young.
Hi.
Hello, Miss Sherry.
Good evening, my dear sister.
How are you doing this evening?
Absolutely grateful for life. That's how I am.
Praise God, praise God. Let me bring on our next special guest here in the house. It's Miss Nawanda. How you doing, lady?
Oh, I have no complaints at all. How are you doing?
I am doing amazing, and thank you for joining. And I see Tiffany has joined us as well. Hello, Miss
Hi.
Tiffany. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you for joining us. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to go ahead and first, Miss Sherry, can you introduce yourself to everyone on the audience, please?
Certainly, my name is Sherry Young. I currently reside here in Columbus, Ohio, although I am from Detroit. I am a part of an organization called At the Table, which is a group of women who focus on serving women in the community. Both Pamela, your host, and I are on that board, and we have the pleasure of bringing programs, awareness to initiatives like what we'll share tonight. I'm the program director, and we've got some interesting things going on. I'll share only about one. It's called Thrive, THRIVE, which stands for Transcending Her Real Life Issues Victoriously Through Empowerment. And our biggest initiative through that particular program is a mentorship program that we've got set up in one of the local high schools that tries to make girls know early on you don't have to end up where you start out. That's us.
That is so amazing. So thank you for sharing that powerful story. So needed, and we so needed to need that out here in the community, especially what's going on in the society, all that we're facing. So everybody, as I have Miss Sherry and myself from At the Table, I have some amazing powerhouse here sitting on the panel list. And the first one here, I'm gonna read their bios, and then we're gonna ask them to share a little bit of their story, and we'll just talk about domestic violence. One thing I wanted to let everyone know, I did do some research on here and I checked out, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, nearly 20 people per minute are abused. 20 people. That's just, and there's got to be a way where we can make that number little to nothing. And one way to do it is to talk about it and bring awareness and sit. And here's a place we're going to do it. So the first amazing woman I'm going to read her bio on is Miss Nawanda. Miss Nawanda wears many hats that she does. She is a healthcare IT contractor, focused entrepreneur, as of late, an inspirational encourager to those who are starting their wellness journey. She's doing an amazing job. You guys got to follow her. Let's see. She is also a mother to two adult children. I won't say your children's names because I don't want to mess them up and I don't want to disrespect you, as well as your amazing granddaughter that I see working out with you in your shows. In 2016, she left full-time corporate healthcare and went to consulting to offer her services to assist healthcare organizations implementing electronic medical record system. It was also at this time that her life drastically changed because she found the strength to remove herself from an abusive Wow. Abusive marriage of over 20 years. Her journey has been up and down, but she's embraced all the changes and knows she'll be better on the end, at the other end. So true. And I commend you for doing that, taking that step. So then the next, I'm gonna read everybody's bio and then we can talk. So then the next amazing woman that has joined us is Tiffany, Miss Tiffany. I got to hear a little bit about you from Miss Sherry. So thank you for joining us. Tiffany is the disruptor who's the executive director of Dove's Network, author of the book Forgotten, Living in the Shadows of Domestic Violence, the CEO of Messiah and company, excuse me, corporate America liaison by day, advocate and groundbreaker by night. You go, girl. Tiffany has spent the last decade healing, uncovering, and studying the impact and trauma effects of growing up in a home with domestic violence, known as childhood domestic violence. Tiffany, a CDV survivor, has fastly become a voice for domestic violence, recovery for children. Tiffany is proudly married to her purpose partner, AJ Messiah, and parents to Andrea and Kyra. Is that right?
Yeah, Kyra Mensa.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us. And then the last amazing woman I have is Dion. Is that correct? Deanna. Well, welcome. How are you doing? I haven't seen you in a minute.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you. Deanna is an aspiring and motivating others to live their life out loud and conquer their fears. She is seen as to go to motivating keynote speaker for events and multiple organizations that desire their audience to be moved from complexity to action and greatly improve the self-esteem of their clients. Confident levels will shoot through the roof and ultimately achieve maximum results. So true. She has been given the name Miss Motivation due to her unconditional and intriguing way of captivating her audience. She gives an electrifying experience that propel one to respond with action. As a result of her own experience of surviving domestic violence, Dion started Live, is that correct? Live Out Loud Enterprises, an organization in which with one aspect is to help rise awareness of domestic violence in the community, where the mission is to educate, empower, and to prevent domestic violence. Through Dion's advocacy, she has the opportunity to collaborate with the House representatives and other policymakers and be a voice in House Bill 1, passing as law, which created better protection for those that are victims of domestic violence, as well as help initiate other laws that pertain to bettering the judicial system for domestic violence. Dion has been recognized by the state of Ohio for her efforts of bringing awareness of domestic violence in the community through her organization. She has helped so many that are impacted by this hidden and sometimes forgotten issues. So true. She's appeared and interviewed on the Doctors, CNN, TBN, Your World with Creole Dollar, Essen, The Tom Joyner Morning Show, Good Day Columbus, Today Purpose Woman Magazine, The Voice Magazine, and dozen other media outlets. Dion holds a bachelor degree from Howard University in Washington, D.C. She is a social worker with the city of Columbus and an author. So again, ladies, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us and talk about this most important topic that we need to start talking about and just bringing ahead and hear how we can at least diminish the number down, bring the number down. If not, make it zero, but at least make it half the number. So with that being said, Nwanda, can you tell everybody just a little bit about your story? You're on mute.
That would be helpful if I take myself off of mute. So I was married for 20 years. And what I will say is when I talk about my story, I focus more on the survival of it than the being in it. Because one thing that is, for my case, which was different, they say a lot of times people who are in domestic violence situations grew up in domestic violence situations. I did not. My dad and my mom, he loved her. He took care of his family. I think I got spanked by my dad one time, and that's all it took. I was like, okay, I'm good here, So I did not grow up in that. And so I think the hard part for me was being an innate fixer because, my background is in social work. We can fix anything, we can fix it, And I think being an innate fixer, I was like, okay, this is something, I must be doing something wrong. I need to fix this. I need to fix this. Not knowing and understanding that I can't do the work for somebody else. And that's what it really comes down to. So no matter how much I try, he had his own challenges that were manifesting themselves in abusive things towards me and my children. And so for me, I think the last straw where I finally, because I'm somebody that I still believe in marriage. And that was something I think was used against me during that time because you're like, you don't believe in divorce. You're not going nowhere. You don't even believe in divorce. And honestly, I didn't believe in divorce until I did, and so it was one of those things that, my mom and dad, until my dad passed, were together. That's all I knew. I grew up in church. I was a pastor's kid. I married a pastor's kid. So that in itself had its own set of challenges because, when you're in the religious community, we put the mask on. We look good coming in. My family looks put together. Trust me, they go, oh, that's okay. Never knowing the hell that we're going through behind closed doors. And I will say, I think one of the other challenges that when I was going through it, nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about it. You never heard a church talk about domestic violence. I never heard, you just did not hear about it. Even women who were in a generation older than me, if they went through it, nobody knew, nobody talked about it. So when you don't have anybody talk about it, you're just like, okay, I guess I need to try to fix something, and when you don't grow up in that situation and you don't have that, you really don't have the tools on how to get out of a situation that you've never experienced. A lot of times, I think I was one of them, like, I would never, and you would never catch me, and let him say something wrong. Watch me. Yeah, baby, don't say it until you've been there. Okay. Because you do a lot of stuff that you thought you would never do because now your mindset is, okay, I got to try to keep my family together. I have to try to keep my family together. I have to, maybe I'm not being a good enough wife. Maybe I need to change something about me, until you get to the realization that there's nothing that you can do to change how they act. It's work that they need to do. And if they are not willing to do that, it doesn't matter what you do, that person will always have that in them. And for me, I think the final straw was when he basically had told a lie on my dad. The one man I trust with my life, you're not going to tell me that you did not say XYZ to my dad. And when my dad, because I was a daddy's girl, like my dad was my heart. I was all like, when he passed away, I was just like, okay, this world is not okay. But when he told me, he was like, because I would call him with certain things, and he was like, you have to do what's best for you and your children. It was almost like that was my get out of marriage card, and I was just like, either you go or I go. Somebody's got to go. And trust me, I will leave this house like this. I don't care. And one thing I learned is you have to be creative. Because for me, we were living under the same roof, everything's going on. Now I'm consuming all of the financial burden because you're not, contributing. You're saying you're not going to. So I got creative. I said, okay, let me go find a place to live. Went and signed a lease. Then I said, okay, so are you going to pay the mortgage? And he was like, no. I was like, well, I'm not paying it either. I had called their mortgage company. I asked them, I said, how long before my house goes into foreclosure? They told me how long. I said, okay, how long will it take you to take my house? And they told me, oh, it's going to take us at least a year. I said, bet. So my thing was, you not paying? I'm not paying either. And I just kept on putting that money aside. And finally, when he realized that I wasn't paying, I'm like, because I will leave. I have no problem with everything that's here. I don't care. I can't do this anymore. And for me, it was like, that was the button that he was just like, okay, she's really not playing anymore. And he wound up leaving because I told him, I said, well, you stay here, make sure you can take care of all of this, because I'm not, like, once I'm done. And so he wound up leaving when I was out of town. And my daughter told me, she called me, she was like, he's gone. Of course, I had locks changed and everything like that. But it was one of those things that I was at the place where I had enough. And I was at the place where either you go or I go. I don't care nothing about this house, nothing about the stuff in this house. I will leave all this stuff and start over and don't even care. But I wound up, when he did leave, I called my mortgage company. I said, okay, I need a payment plan now. And they were like, no problem. So they put me on a payment plan, so, my house was saved and everything. But it was at the point where I had to get creative to say, okay, if you're not going to contribute and you're I'm not going to do it, because before I was making sure things got paid. So I'm like, I need a roof over my head. My kids need somewhere to stay. I need to make sure all that stuff is in place. And, one thing I will say is that one thing I've learned through that is call a red flag a red flag. Don't give it creative colors. Don't say it's fuchsia, it's hot pink, it's a nice amber color. No, a red flag is a red flag. And once you realize that you can't fix other people, you can't do other people's work, and talk about it. If you get out, talk about it. Because it took me, left 5 years to even talk about it. But the freedom and the healing that it allows you to have, also being able to give other women a sense of hope that you can thrive after domestic violence. We worked in survival mode so long that it's like, wow, this is what it feels like to thrive. This is what it feels like to actually live. And, and it's just, we do such a good job of putting masks on so nobody knows, nobody knows. And I just think that going through that, I'm grateful for my life. That's how I look. I'm grateful for me and my children's life, that we got out of it and we're still living and we're here to tell a story. And hey, do we still have more healing to do? Absolutely. Every day is another day to get better. But what happens is when you have the strength to talk about it, you take your power back, because when you don't talk about it, they still have the power, because they're like, oh, you ain't going to tell nobody about that because you don't want to be embarrassed. Like, you're not going to say nothing because you don't want people to looking at you crazy. I'm at the point now, I don't care. Honestly, I don't, because there is somebody's life that may be saved because they're like, wow, they had the strength to do it and they are thriving and they are living. And so it's one of those things where it's part of my story. It's a part of my story that'll be told. But it's about me taking my power back, because I no longer allow that person to make me feel shame in the pain that I went through being in that situation.
You're on mute, Pam.
Thank you, Miss Sherry. Look, after I was talking to Nwanda about unmute yourself. Thank you, Nwanda. That is a powerful story. And there will be some questions that I'll have, but I want everyone to first share their story. So Tiffany, tell us a little bit about your story, please.
Yeah, my story piggybacks a little bit on Miss Turner's story, but from the aspect of the kid. So I grew up in a home of domestic violence, and the story began as I was sitting at the living room table with my brother doing homework on a Saturday afternoon, watching my father beat down my mom. And that continued until I was 16 years old. I was 9 at the time. And with that came the much more of the frequencies of it. And the reason that my mother received a beating that day is because my father is also he was a pastor at that time. And she had called the church and asked for prayer, and they disclosed to my father, that was the reason why. And from there, apparently the abuse was going on all throughout their marriage. They're married for 30 years. But now I'm the youngest of four. Now I'm starting to see it. And now it's like we're not hiding it in plain sight. So my childhood went from one of what I thought was a happy childhood to now I'm using my ear to determine what version of dad is going to come home today from work. What am I going to do to make sure I can nurse my mom's wounds, protect her? Because as the statistic talks to, a victim leaves 7 to 8 different times. Well, that was my mom's story. We left a total of 7 to 8 different times from the age of 9 to the age of 16 when she said enough was enough. Thankfully, she was able to divorce him with her life. However, that we know that that is not always the statistic of it. So each time that we were on the run, we were staying with friend of a friend. Like you said, don't talk about it. What happens here stays here. We stayed with family members. We didn't go to shelter, but it was those that were of the unknown. And a lot of those visits, mom was treated with a lot of empathy, a lot of care, but I was the baggage, right? I was treated with, you're a brat, you're spoiled, because I wouldn't talk. Also, when you're growing up in a home with domestic violence, you're essentially taught, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, on top of being a preacher's kid where you're to be seen and not heard. So social circles were not allowed in my household. You were only allowed to be around the core family that you grew up on. There was no outside circles. There was no social gatherings. There was no other family. So now I am forced to go to these other homes and stay with other people, but I don't know how to have social interaction with you because this has been my upbringing. And instead of them seeing that, there is the layer of, oh, you're Brad, you're labeled this. We're going to different churches. That's a different denomination than what I grew up. So that's also an experience where I'm getting hands laid on me, telling me we're going to pray the demon out of you. Because again, I was socially withdrawn. Kids that experience or exposed to trauma go through 3 stages of fight, flight, or freeze. And freeze was a lot of my emotions of what was being displayed. And because no one really talked about childhood domestic violence was a thing back then, and really it's still less than 15% of awareness now that it is a thing, even though 2 billion children around the United States is growing up, around the world actually is growing up in it, and 15 million specifically in the US. And so the care that needed to be shown just wasn't there. And there were also youth within the home that didn't want me there. And quite frankly, I didn't want to be there either. I had my own home toys, all that as well. But they made it very uncomfortable for me to be there. So I'm also getting bullied. And the only way that I can see, because I've seen it modeled in my home, was conflict resolution was resolved through throwing hands. So I too became a fighter for myself because my mom was focused on trying to survive. And a lot of the financial abuse that occurred within the home, because as a statistic also shows, 99% of domestic violence has financial abuse element within there. My mother also was a homemaker. She did not work. So a lot of the times we kept going back is because it was hard to sustain a life for her and myself when she was financially dependent on my father for so long. Part of our story as I became more fighting, vocal. Now I'm in the fight mode of the fight, flight, or freeze. And I just started self-medicating through the streets, through peers, through culture. And thankfully, there was one individual that saw me who I didn't really like him back then, just to be quite honest, but he spoke truth. And I didn't like truth at the time, but he also saw my giftings and he fed the gifting of writing for me. And he continued to walk that down, and that softened me up and kept me open. to what life had, because I also became an overperformer or overachiever. Because if I can just do my part in school, I don't have to worry about mom getting beat at home on my account. I can do my part by showing up every day and doing what I'm supposed to do in school while self-medicating these other avenues. So I go through from teenage through adulthood. Now I'm taking on personas of I'm in corporate America, straight out of college, but now those traumas of little Tiff is showing up in the boardroom, where now I'm now becoming the abuser. I had my first domestic violence relationship at the age of 17, but I thought that it wasn't domestic violence because I'm fighting back. I'm not doing, what I saw my mom do. I'm not just taking that. I'm fighting back. So this is normal. And it wasn't. And that cycle continued until once I got into corporate, I became the abuser myself, because I figured I don't need your money. I can tell you what to do. I can control you. I can go through your phone. I can stalk you, see what you're doing, because again, I'm the breadwinner, which again, total just no dysfunction. But again, I'm now trying to justify in my mind, well, maybe this is why my dad was doing what he was doing. Now I think it's normal because I'm the breadwinner. Like now I'm kind of trying to rationalize this is what is happening, until I almost got fired from the job, the best job that I had, and was like, no, because my identity is this, can't lose that. But I had to have some truth conversations and have a hard talk with myself on the different patterns that I had, because I'm a corporate, what to say, I'm a corporate boss in the boardroom, but I'm fighting in clubs at night because of the selection of men I'm in. And there's different patterns of this dysfunction that continue to show. So I ended up going to counseling for 8 years to kind of try to uproot these traumas, to understand what was happening within my life. And for the first time within counseling, that I understand the fact that, oh, this plays a part, that, oh, this is an adverse childhood experience based on the statistic of that trauma exposure. One, I'm cutting my life short, because with the exposure left unhealed, you cut 20 years off your life. So the more times I keep going, popping off and doing all these different things, I'm making myself sick, because at the age of 24, I'm being told I have high blood pressure, which is like, how? And it's because I'm popping off at every 2 seconds and not identifying the triggers that kept taking me back to that young girl. And going through healing, I did walk away from the church because I felt church wasn't a safe space, because I felt that with my father being a preacher, there being no accountability, multiple preachers, multiple people told my mother, God hates divorce, go back, you just need to be a good wife. All of those things that was said in church spaces to brush over the trauma instead of getting her and the family to safety. She was sent back as, I would say, like a lamb to the slaughter. Thankfully, she survived that. So I felt God condone that. And it wasn't until one of the churches that we were going to at post-divorce, and my mom supporting her journey, whatever makes her happy, but I watched how they loved on her soul. And it was one of the pastors, through his transparency, told me that the humanity of man doesn't change the divinity of God. And God doesn't condone this, and he's not happy about that. What happened, he did care for your mom, but yet the gifts and the calls are irrevocable. So yes, your father is a preacher, that is his call, but he's still going to have to deal with the actions he did. Those were the little seeds that helped me propel into healing. And on top of going into healing, that is when I started, my whole outlook changed. A whole new me arose, a version of me that I did not know could exist. And also having a healthy, safe space with peers, and also just detoxing from relationships, not dating for years on end, to understand who I am and who my identity was. And on the other side of my healing, I got blessed with an amazing husband, with also 2 bonus daughters. And through that was the birth of the book that you mentioned, because I now came from a healing place of looking back over the traumas. Because, oh, by the way, my book was a manuscript, was my final college essay paper. So I came back from a lens of healing. And in doing that research, that's when I found out, wait, childhood domestic violence is a thing, that 40 million adults grew up in these homes. My heart became plagued to hearing the news stories about what this woman's being murdered, kids left behind, or this woman was beat in front of the kids, or father kills the mother and all the children. And my heart was like, what happens to the kids? how are the kids healing? You don't hear the kid's story it's very few and far in between. And it became my life's mission after that to, okay, I'm going to do this book, to not just write this book, but to drive the awareness of the child, be the voice of the child, so that someone can go back and say, hey, they need healing, because these childhood traumas do show up no matter how successful you are in life, how old you get. Those childhood traumas do show up later on. And I strive to be the voice to show that you aren't forgotten. So that's my story.
I love it. That was very powerful. And thank you for sharing. I have questions, ladies, so be prepared. And Dion, what about your story? Can you give a little bit of your story, please?
Yes. So first I want to thank you and Sean for putting on this program. I think it's good when you can not only be an advocate, but also be in a position where you connect with other people that feel as passionate about domestic violence as you do. And so I want to thank you both for allowing myself and the other two survivors to be on this platform. My situation is, I heard pieces of my story with each of the survivors that did speak. Mine started off, which was more emotional, mental, financial, and verbal abuse. So I met him in Columbus, but I stayed in Dayton at the time. And just driving back and forth from Dayton to Columbus, just dating him, trying to figure out who he was. There was a time where he did show a sign of being being abusive, and that was when he asked to see my phone. And I'm being nonchalant and just, allowing him to see my phone. And he was like, the next time that you come back up to Columbus, all of your male contacts better be out of your phone. And I'm like, what? I didn't get it because we weren't even dating that long. So I'm questioning him and saying, I don't understand why you would say that when me and you haven't been dating that long. And he was just like, when you come up, you better make sure all of those phone numbers are out of the phone. And so when I go back to dating, I did call him and say, I don't think that I want to continue the relationship because it just didn't sit right with me what you had said. And what he did was he promised that if I came back to Columbus the next weekend, he would take me on a shopping spree. And for him, a shopping spree was extreme, like it was name brand. So it was a Gucci, it was a Burberry, it was Prada, all in the top line name brand. And so what I did was I chose to put on my blinders through his apology and move forward in the relationship. So we end up moving in together. Noticed that he was an alcoholic, always drinking all the time. He quit his job because he felt like we weren't spending enough time together, which left me to pay all the bills. And so here I am struggling to pay all the bills. And I finally asked him, like, can you get a job? Because we need help. Well, I need help. So he gets a second shift job. Now, I'm working first shift and he gets a second shift job. And his thing was for me to take him to work. I was a caseworker. But his thing was for me to take him to work while I'm still working at 8 to 5, take him to work and then pick him up at night. And so I would do that. I would do that through his manipulation. He was always the type that would ask me, what am I wearing before I go out, and wanted to take a look at it to survey and see if it was okay or approved by him. And if it wasn't, he would ask for me to change. And so he was also one that compared me to other women. So his thing was, you should look like this. You should look like the women on the videos. You're getting too fat. Nobody's gonna want you. You're ugly. Things like that. And so he diminished my self-esteem. And so being with him, I had no self-esteem. And he also isolated me from my family. And that was through me communicating to him certain things that would go on between me and my mom, and him using that and manipulating that and turning it against me and just making it an ugly situation. And so I had completely cut off my mother. Like, I didn't talk to her while I was in that relationship because of his manipulation and gaslighting. And men that are abusive, they know the sneaky tactics to use to be able to twist things around and to get you in a position where they want you and they can keep you all to themselves. And so time goes on, and during our relationship, all we did was argue, scream, yell. We were always arguing. And so I remember one night I went out with his sister, And so it was always me telling him where I'm going, who I'm going with, what I'm dressed like. And he would, again, just survey what I have on. And so I left out, I get back home, and he's in the house, like in total complete darkness. And this was my first time I ever kind of felt fear. And so he questioned me. He questioned me on everything I've already gave, all the information I already provided for him. He's questioning it. So I get upstairs and I started praying. You know, I started praying to God, and I was just like, I'm tired I was emotionally and mentally tired. And so I was just like, you know, God, I'm really ready to leave. And got up that morning and was like, you know, I think we need to go our own separate ways. Now back up, we went to Thanksgiving. We went to Dayton for Thanksgiving at my dad's house. And we were all having a conversation, me and my family members, and we were just talking about, you know, our future and what we aspire to do. And he clearly said, when he gets through with me, I'm going to be better than all of them. Whatever his task was with me, once he got done with that, I would be better than all of my sisters. And so I heard what he said. I'm trying to play it off, but my family members, like, you know, that next week they called and they were just like, did you hear what he said? You know, did you hear? And I'm like, no, I played it off. But it was then where I recognized he no longer looked at me as a human being, but he looked at me as an object. And so I'm moving forward to when I told him that we had to separate. I get my own place immediately, but he helped me move all of my things into my new place. So that first week he calls me. I clicked over. I'm talking on the phone with my mom. And I tell him I can't talk long because I'm on the phone. In a matter of minutes, he was knocking at my door. And my mom was like, who is that? And, you know, I'm like, I think it's him. So get to the door. I don't open it, I just crack it. And he busts through, he searches my home, see if anybody's there. And of course, no one's there. So he leaves. And my mom is like, well, you know, do you feel safe? I'm like, yeah. She was like, I think you should get a protection order. I'm like, no, it'll be okay. You know, I don't think he'll do anything. And so, knowing what I know now, even if I wanted to get a protection order against him, I wouldn't have been able to get it because I'm not married to him. I don't have children with him. Like, there's no evidence of, you know, him beating me or anything like that. I wouldn't have been able to get a protection order. But due to House Bill 1 passing, now that's put in place, a victim or a survivor would be able to get that. But that second week he called me, told me he wanted to come get some dishes. He comes over and he starts arguing, and I'm like, you know, you can let yourself out because I'm not getting ready to do this. And so and I'm just going through it and moving fast forward. But that night he pulled out a gun. And so he pulled this gun out. To me, you know, this is it. I'm done. This is it. I'm getting ready to die. This is my last night existing on earth. And so he made it where he barricaded me so I couldn't get out. But that whole hour and a half, it was just like, you know, how it was manipulation of, I want you to see what you're doing to me. I'm ready to end my life. This gun is not for you, but I'm tired. I'm tired because you left me. This is what the result is, because this is what you did, Deanna. This is what you did. And so for an hour and a half, we're going back and forth with that whole scenario of me being the blame and the cause of why he's going to shoot himself. And so there was a moment where he let up off the door. When he let up off the door, I went to go reach for it. And so that was when he raised the gun up and he pointed it at me, and he shot me twice at point blank range, one in the chest and once in the chest and once in the wrist. And so my first thought was, you know, I didn't want my mom to see me in the casket. And I just remember running, you know, out of my apartment and getting to a neighbor's home, and, you know, them calling 911, them getting there, me going into the hospital. And I remember excruciating pain on the side of my ribs, like, and I was moving so much on this bed that a little doctor jumped on top of me, a little female doctor. She jumped on top of me and said, if you don't stop moving, you're gonna die. And I blacked out, and I woke up to the TV that said attempted homicide, suicide. So he had shot himself in the head. He's still living to this day, confined to a wheelchair. But I moved back to Dayton with my mom. As a result of me being shot, my left lung collapsed, my rib bone was chipped. I had to have micro hand surgery because of the heat of the bullet. It damaged some of the nerves in my wrist. But I get back home, and I get back home with my mom, the lady that I turned my back on. She was the one who helped me pick the pieces up to get myself back together. And I did eventually move back to Columbus. And I moved back to Columbus with a purpose, and that was to be an advocate for those people who are too afraid to speak up on the experience of domestic violence. And so that's how Live Out Loud Enterprises evolved, which helps to raise awareness of gun and domestic violence. And it's also how, my book, Survival is Victory, came about, because I feel like if people are aware of domestic violence and what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it may taste like, what it may feel like, then they're more prone to remove themselves out of the situation than stay in it. Because I didn't know I was a survivor of domestic violence until I actually got out of the relationship and I saw a commercial and I was like, that was me. That was me. And that was kind of like my wake up call to awareness of being in domestic violence.
Ladies, you guys all have some powerful stories. And so I hope I hope you all are listening out there. And I know one of their stories, a piece of each of their stories has touched someone that is facing domestic violence. So let me ask you this, ladies. I see you each had dealt with domestic violence in different stages of your life. And you all talked about, the denial piece of knowing it's not me. We say, for instance, we have someone out there that's going through it right now. What piece of advice could you give to them?
For me, I think it's find somebody that you can trust, that you can talk to, because I think what happens is we feel so much shame going through it, because inherently we're like, okay, somehow, some way, this is my fault, this is happening. And so we try to fix it. When Tiffany was talking about the childhood domestic violence, and she was talking about like the overachiever, like you just talked about my daughter. I mean, because she is a high achiever, and it's because of what she experienced with that. And so I would say find somebody you can trust, and somebody who can help you get out. Because I think that's what the scary part is, when you don't have a way out or don't know how to get out. You may need somebody just to say, hey, this is a safe space. You can stay here if you need to be safe. I won't tell nobody where you are until you can get a plan, because you do deny. You're like, no, that, like Deanna was saying, I was like, domestic violence. But then when you get out, you was like, girl, that's what you was in, and it's mind blowing, because domestic violence does not discriminate. It doesn't matter how much education you have. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what color you are, because I would look at myself as a very well-educated person. I have a master's degree. I'm in corporate America. I'm an IT consultant. Like, what? It didn't discriminate. It was me. So finding that person that you can trust and you can be transparent to, and that won't go tell people who might tell other people back to that person and cause more harm in the household. Because that's, we shared with some people, like my daughter shared, and somehow it got back around to my ex, and then we would have to deal with that wrath, and so that's what makes you not talk, because you're just like, well, I talked and now my life is worse because I talked. So I'm not going to talk. I'm going to try to deal with it myself and figure it out. So having that person who can be a safe space that you can trust, and that that you have confidence in them, and they can help you without causing more harm to the situation you're already in.
I love it. Ladies, anyone else?
I'll piggyback on there first too, when you say like, no, that's not me. the first thing is to know that what we see in these songs, in these videos, in these movies is not the true depiction of love, because a lot of the things that we think is love is normalized dysfunction. So the first thing, if you're like, no, that's not me, there is a list. If you go to the hotline.org, or if you download Are You Safe app, just look through some of the things. First is being fully aware on what domestic violence is. Domestic violence is beyond the black eye, right? Knowing the emotional, knowing the financial, knowing the digital, knowing the spiritual, getting educated on what those are, and kind of without bias, just look at what those definitions are. Look at that checklist that has on Are You Safe, to really say, is this what I'm in? Have a truth moment with yourself, and exactly what she just said, giving yourself grace and giving yourself biggest is grace, because there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt. When I finally came to the realization of mine, of all of the relationships that I was in, it was like, I can't tell my mom, I can't tell my family, like, how did I end up here? And that is the bondage that holds you in even longer. So being able to speak that this is me, but having the desire to safely get out, to safely exit, because we know leaving is the most dangerous time. So being able to first identify and be fully versed, and then have those safe people.
Absolutely. Dion, what about you?
I actually agree with both of the ladies. If you have to question if it's you, that's a telltale sign that you may be in it, and just educating yourself around the topic of domestic violence, so that you can become aware of if I'm in it or not.
One thing I do like I so agree, and thank you. So thing I did really hone in onto when Nawanda was saying her story, actually I have different pieces that I really hone in on each of your stories. One that really, really stood out to me, Nawanda, all of it, was being creative. How did you even know to start to being creative?
For me, I knew I was at the point, honestly, where I had to get out, because if I didn't get out, either I was going to be in jail or dead. Had to go. And so for me, it was like, I need a place for me and my kids. Okay, that's nothing but a lease somewhere else. Like, yeah, I own this house, but I didn't care. But I just started thinking, I'm like, okay, if he don't pay the mortgage, that means I got to pay the mortgage. Okay, that means everything's on me. So if everything's on me, why are you still here if I'm paying everything and you're still getting the paycheck? Why are we doing this? And so for me, it was almost like the God kicked in, like, you need to call the mortgage company and ask them if you don't pay X, Y, Z. I mean, literally, because I don't even know what caused me to be like, yeah, that's a good idea, but it was something, because I don't know if we had been on an arrangement before. I don't know, but it was just like, I'm just going to call them. I was like, all they can tell me is, no, you're going to lose your house in 2 months or whatever. But once I talked to them and they said that, I said, I have to use this as leverage. This is my way out, because if I stay, he can't stay.
Mm-hmm.
And if he stays, I got to go. And I was prepared. And I think because I was so prepared to leave, it wasn't like I was at the mind frame of, I'm not going to sit here and wallow and talk about, oh, this is the first house I ever bought, and what am I going to do with my kids? I was in that fight mode. I was in the mode where I got to survive. I have to find some place for me and my kids, whether it's here or not. It doesn't matter, but I can't do this anymore. And I think that was, for me, the most important part, when I got to the space where I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. I don't care about the mask. I don't care. I can't do this. And being creative really just gave me leverage, because I knew, I mean, literally, when everything was going downhill and it was just getting worse. And, you know, talk like when Tiffany was talking about, you know, you're listening for the kind of temperament that they're in when they come. It's like, I couldn't sleep, you know, because I'm like, okay, what kind of mood is it going to be when they come home? You know, am I going to get dishes breaking? Am I going to, you know, get stuff taken, you know, stuff stolen? And you just don't know. So you are in a constant state of unrest, you know, unrest and stress is on a million. And so I couldn't do that anymore. And so for me, it was the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I had probably the biggest fight mode ever because I was like, if I don't leave this, I'm not going to survive. I'm not only, and it wasn't just a physical surviving, it's like mentally, because I think a lot of people try to capsulate domestic violence into just physical. There's the emotional, there's the, you know, taking you away from your family or not visiting your family as much. There's the, I can't believe you would do that, because I remember when I was going, I had thought about going in consulting, and I wasn't going to do it until our youngest graduated high school, because I'm like, I'm that present parent. But I remember when I had approached my ex about it, because with consulting, you travel every week, you know, but that's part of it because you get paid more to do what you're doing. And I had brought it to him, so I'm like, you know, this will help. And the response I got from him was, you would leave me home every week like that? And in my mind, I'm like, well, my income will increase, which would benefit the family. But it was, the response to me was like, you would leave me home. And so for me, that was the one of the start spiraling, because it's not even about us as the family anymore. It's really just about what benefits you and what's good for you. And that's the way that manipulation, you know, and just those tactics. But you have to be creative, and sometimes you just have to do things that you would not normally do, you know, because not paying my bills is something that I would not normally do, you know. But in this situation, it was, I'm not paying it. And I held fast to that. I didn't care that he was like, well, I'm not paying it and you're going to lose the house. Because I already knew, well, we're going to ride this out and see who leaves first. Because even if you don't pay it and you don't leave, I have somewhere to go. You're not going to know the address. You're not going to know where I'm going. I'm going, you know? So you have to be creative. But it takes you to get to the space where you really have had enough. And you are really ready to just, as painful as it is, because that's still a form of grief you're dealing with. Even though you're in a domestic situation that's not healthy, when you leave that, you still deal with grief, you know, especially when you've been connected to that person, you still have that grief to go through and process. You know, a lot of people think that, oh yeah, great, you're out. Yes, great, we're happy, we're out. But there are still those levels of grief that not only you deal with, but your children deal with too, because that's their father.
So
you know,
true.
so it's not a stranger, that's their father. And so being able to deal with that and seeing a therapist, like therapy, I tell you, I live by therapy. I tell them, like, y'all pray, I pray too, but honey, I go see my therapist every Tuesday at 9:30. Okay, me and her have tea time, because it's really important to get that help to process that, because if you don't, like I think Tiffany might have said, it does manifest itself. It's going to come back in some form, in some fashion. So you have to heal. You have to get that help and not be ashamed of it, you know?
Absolutely. Tiffany, what did you have to say?
I also wanted to piggyback on there a little bit, because a lot of what she said got caught. I saw that mirror. So for someone, I wanted to just preface, if you're watching and you may be in that, you know your situation better than any of us. So creative her way, creative your way may be different, because a lot of times we know that there's victims who aren't able to vocally speak those things out like that. So the first thing that you want to do in getting creative is have a safety plan. connecting with your local resources, agencies, advocates, again, the hotline.org, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, to be able to get the safety plan. I watched my mother jump out of the backyard, the back door of our house, into oncoming traffic to get away from my father. And she went stealth. Don't know where she went until later on. Other times, father would go to work in the middle of the night. We're leaving in the middle of the night with just a book bag of stuff. If you have a family member or friend that you know that is in this situation, be educated on the resources that's available for them. Have a go bag ready for them. Have resources that's practical for them and their children as well. And the other thing that my mom will do, again, we are cognizant. I know I am cognizant of sharing all the deets online because abusers and offenders could also be watching. So it's also like, if you need creative ideas, definitely inbox any of the ones on the panelists. And also those advocates help you as well. But like she said, that was my mom's statement when she ended the last time. Like, it's either going to be me or it's going to be him. And I can't do this anymore. And that's when she got the papers in motion, PPOs in motion, paper trail, lock change, having the police standing right there when he's trying to come home, because she was afraid. And he mentioned many times, if you try to leave me, I'm going to kill you, or the kids. So all those factors considered in there. And just as you're listening to our stories, the temperature gauge someone else as well, even if they may leave and go back. Be non-judgmental. Don't judge their actions. Just be a safe space for them by being educated and being resourceful.
Absolutely. Dion, what about you?
I don't have much to say. I think both the ladies did a good job. But when Miss Turner was talking, it just gave me the thought about why I don't call these people that experience these situations victims. I always, regard them as survivors, because every day they are surviving. They're using their survival tactics, being creative on how do I, survive each day. And each day may look different. Each day may mean I am literally being I'm being a good wife today. That's my survival tactic for today. Or, I'm going to act like I'm going to go visit my sister, but really I'm going to go get some information on how I can get housing. Like, they're always coming up with these ideas on how to survive until that exit plan is put in place, it's locked and secure, and they can execute it in a safe manner. So I always refer to us as survivors, regardless if we're in it still, or if we made a way out, or if we have passed and gone to the other side. Survivors.
So what can we do to break down this barrier and start making it to be okay to talk about it? What can we do? We as women, we as society, what can we do to help women, for me to create a safe space for you? What can we do?
I think one, I talk about what a support system looks like in my book. And because a lot of times, just like they said, you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, and you're thinking like, man, I wasn't raised like this. My mom did not raise me where a man is supposed to put his hands on me, or, I just wasn't raised like that. And now this is happening to me. I'm embarrassed and I really don't want to tell anyone. But as a support system, if you see somebody going through it, they're in that situation, you create an environment that looks totally different than the environment that this survivor is dealing with. So they're getting beat, they're getting abused, they're getting dogged out, they're getting talked about, they're getting belittled. But as a support system, you uplift them. You sis, you got it going on. Oh, you're so beautiful. I believe you can go to college and get your degree. Oh yeah, that job you were looking at taking that promotion, I believe you can take that promotion. You're being a good mother. You're being a good person. Like, keep boosting their confidence up, because what happens is they'll teeter-totter back and forth in that environment where they feel ashamed, they feel hurt and negative. Then they come to this other environment where they feel good, they feel empowered, and yes, it takes 7 times for them to leave. But I believe that in that positive environment, something will click eventually that will cause them to disengage from that feeling an emotion that just doesn't sit right with them, and then they'll be able to move forward and get the help they need so that they can get on the other side of domestic violence.
Thank
But
you.
we as a support system have to set it up, and we have to create a nurturing environment. You can't to be like, girl, you
Right.
need to get out of there. Why are you still with him? No, you beating her up too.
Right.
Like why you doing the same thing? So and then we have to give them choice, because in this environment with this abuser, they have no choices. But if we create an environment of choice and somewhat of freedom, it creates something different in them. It gives them that leverage, and also that to me, that encouragement and empowerment to be like, okay, I got this, I can do this. But it may take them a while, but they'll get it.
And Tiffany,
Yeah.
what about you?
Everything she said. And on top of that, too, is making sure in terms of challenging culture. Domestic Violence Awareness Month and breast cancer in the same month, yet so many people do not even know or recognize domestic violence. And both have, and I celebrate all of the survivors of breast cancer, not taking anything away from that. But breast cancer takes lives, domestic violence takes lives as well. There's lifetime effects from the chemotherapy and the effects of breast cancer. There's same lifetime effects even with domestic violence. And the more we can shine a light and have these conversations, the more you can get educated on there, and the more you challenge the systems. There's so many systems that do not consider the victims, the children, especially even if you go into churches. 44% of survivors clean to their faith, and yet faith spaces still won't talk about it or make space for that marriage counseling that's needed. Marriage counseling is not going to fix an abuser. So there needs to be individual levels. So the more we can challenge these spaces, making sure in our employment offices there's paid leave and paid coverage where jobs are being impacted, where they got to miss work because they're too abused to go in to save space, to make sure there's job protections. There's the making sure that kids are not just getting read off for IEPs, because there could be domestic violence going on where they can't come in class and focus on learning because trauma impacts the brain. Also, so it's continually going into these systems and making sure that safe spaces are being made for the survivors' children to safely heal. So just adding on to what as Ms. Clark just mentioned.
Love it. And then Nawanda?
Yeah, I mean, they've all kind of hit the nail on the head. But when she was talking about the faith base, and it was funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, our churches are supposed to be places of healing, and places of safety. But for me, church was the place where I felt the least safe, because I could not, people knew some of it, but you just didn't feel safe to share. And I was thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if there was a way for these churches to get involved and have ways? And I was just thinking about this, like offering time. We all pass that little envelope around. Wouldn't it be great if there was a way for a woman who was being abused, who wanted to get out that day? Her children are in children's church. She could indicate something on the envelope. When the usher saw it, they escorted her. I mean, what he gonna do? He in church, what are they gonna do? They escort her to the back, get her kids in a safe space, and shovel her on off somewhere safe. I mean, there are just so many things that can be done if the appropriate people get involved, and we really stop making it so taboo to talk about, and stop having that mentality, what goes on in your house stays in your house, because that's what's killing us. That's what's killing us. And we have it to where our children are in pain because of it, and they're dealing with the remnants of it, because, as you say, no matter how much you try to cover it up, your children, like when my children told me things that I thought they did not see that they did, as a mom, that broke my heart, because I'm thinking I'm shielding them, but I'm not. If I'm not, when you got smart enough kids, they're figuring stuff out. And like Tiffany was saying, let me be good and let me do well in school, because then if I do well in school, I don't have to worry about that part, and that's less stress on my mom, because if I'm doing well in school, we don't have to worry about that. And so I just think that more of these places where abuse is happening, figure out how to put programs together to help and really be that place of safety and be that place that can help get them out of that situation when they're ready, into a place where they can still live and have that transition plan. But we don't talk about it, like I said, put this post up, and I said, I know people's mad at me, but I didn't care. I'm like, in October, there are going to be more churches talking about how we can keep these kids from celebrating Halloween, and there will be people talking about how to decrease domestic violence. And that's the truth. That's the truth. We got all, we're thinking, oh, we're going to through this and well, what about domestic violence? What about the people that are doing it in your church?
I see you, Tiffany.
I see your finger, girl. I see you.
I'm just saying too, can we talk to the majority of those millennials that aren't in church right now as well? That we're preaching about Halloween, but then when you go home, they're also the abuse that's also happening in church and being played out within the homes. So one way of the Bible is being portrayed on Sunday, but it's not being lived out, which turns kids could totally off. That was my church finger.
We see that. We see
that church finger. And I don't come from that kind of environment, but that's no excuse for me not to be aware. I think it behooves all of us to recognize, get our head out of the dirt and recognize what's going on. And then for me, if I see something, not to automatically make a judgment, but to go to that person, as the scripture says, in love, properly loving and tuned in to God. Now, if I'm connected properly to the Spirit, then I ought to be able to discern, oh, Tiffany's hurting today. Wow, wonder what that's about. And even offering the opportunity for dialogue. Then once I got that dialogue, though, what you've indicated, Nawanda, to come up with some kind of programs where we can help. We do need to help.
We do. And I'm glad we're doing it. At least this is a start here where we can start talking about it and knowing that we are aware. And you ladies here have come up with so many different ways we can, even like you said, break that barrier of being embarrassed to talk about it. That's one thing. We as women have got to stop doing that and knowing that. And then we always say we can carry it all. Know that you create a system, a support system, that you don't have to carry this. These ladies, these panelists, if you're carrying something like this, you can reach out to any of these ladies on this panel and talk to them and help and reach out to them, and they will be able to help you. So I want everyone to know that, because I feel like I said, this is a perfect time for us to break down the barriers and start talking about it. And I'm like you, Miss Sherry. Now I'm going to take my head out of the sand, and now when someone talks about it or they look, let's talk about it. And then think about what system can we create, or better yet, like Dion says, or all three of you said, create an exit strategy. Because once you have the exit strategy, that's at least helping you knowing, okay, I have a way out. Well, let me work on my way out. So ladies, as we get ready to close, real quick, Tiffany, I see you have on there Dove's Network. What does that stand for?
Daily Overcoming Violence and Embracing Safety. That's
Love
what
it.
it stands for.
Love it. Thank you. Ladies, before we close this down and before I give the last words to Deshawn, Nawanda, what would you like to say to listeners out here?
I would just say to them that you do not have to think that you deserve the abuse, the manipulation. I think a lot of times we tie that to our self-worth and something must be wrong with me. That abuse that you're going through has nothing to do with you. It's about that abuser and the things that they haven't dealt with and the work that they haven't done on themselves. So know that you are worth living a life in which you can thrive, and that you don't always have to be in survival mode. Once you realize that and understand that you are worth fighting for, like you really are. And sometimes you have to have that fight mentality. I had to have that fight mentality to get out. But in the end, I had to I had to choose me. And sometimes you have to choose you. I had to choose me because I needed to be here for my kids. So I had to choose me. And it's okay to choose you when it comes to your survival.
Thank you. Tiffany.
Echoing what Miss Turner also said, but also talking to the parent that may have had their children exposed to it or children was right along with them. You are not the bad guy. It is not your fault that in the children you are seen, you are loved, you are not forgotten about as well. And this is a time, a space that unlike we've ever seen before for special healing to take place. And even in the midst of overcoming and continuing to survive, that take those times of intentionality to just connect and be present with one another, whether that's doing some activities together, whether it's coloring, maybe you don't even have to talk about this, but just having that one-on-one time to just bond means a lot and speaks that presence into your child's life. So
Thank you. Dion, what would you like to leave with?
I would say basically the same thing. Just knowing that, just knowing your self worth, knowing that you are worth more than the situation that you're going through. You deserve more. I believe that domestic violence does start with the self image, self concept, self perception, all of that, and just knowing that your work, you have so much work, you have so much value. Um, and you're better than the situation that you're going through.
Absolutely. Miss Sherry.
I think that I've been exposed to three very phenomenal women. That
Yeah.
you all are awesome. And the fact that one, you are, as Miss Diana said, not victims, but survivors. And that your ability now to survive and thrive, loving that word, and Nawanda, you threw it around a couple of times. Your opportunity now to thrive is contingent as well on you going back and doing just what you're doing right now, sharing it. I would also ditto what I've heard you all say to anybody experiencing it. So you tried it 7 times. That's fine. On that eighth time, get your rusty dusty to move. Don't let any of these things cause you to remain the victim. Become the survivor.
Thank you. Deshawn, would you like to say anything?
It's amazing. Thank you, ladies, for coming on and the platform. It just lets us know that I've been taking some notes that this is our, we have more work to do. And us as an organization wants to hear and see how we can provide change and an impact. And I think everything that's been said, if I could say that, by your stories, that anyone that's going through domestic violence is not alone. So they're not alone. There are other stories, and that could be the strength to start the process. So thank you, and we will be doing more as a collaboration, as a community, and there is more that we can do. So thank you.
So, with that being said, ladies, first and foremost, I want to thank you all for sharing your stories. They have been powerful, impactful, as well as motivating for us as the community to get out here and, as Miss Sherry said, get our rusty butts up and moving and doing something. We need to do that, though, to put the jokes aside. We need to do that. If there's someone out here who is experiencing domestic violence, you can call the domestics hotline at 1-800-SAFE and call. Don't stay in it, and know that you have a community. If you want to talk to someone on this panel about you're facing domestic violence, I will definitely just reach out. I will pass your information along. Know that you're not here doing this by yourself, that you have a tribe, and that we're creating a safe space for you. And so I want to thank all of you for coming on to our platform. This was amazing and powerful. And until next time, everyone, you guys take care of yourself. Watch
I'm
out.
gonna say, Miss, I wanted to say, our organization every year we have an event for domestic violence awareness in October, but of course we haven't did anything with COVID. But next year we are planning a black tie gala. I think it's October the 16th at York Golf Club. The flyer will be out. It's a mass gala, so just be on the lookout for it or whatnot. But it's
definitely share. We will be there for support.
Yeah, and Diane, just make sure you inbox. I just inbox us directly so we can have that information.
Okay. Yes,
Tiffany,
ma'am.
did you want to say anything? I see you turn off your mic.
I was just going to say as well, and starting next month, we're starting our Adopt a Shelter drive where we adopt local shelters. I'm in Arizona, where we adopt local shelters. We're gifting them with unwrapped gifts for the moms and fathers that are also, because in domestic violence, that they can shop safely in the shelters without going out for their children. So we're starting off that drive next month too.
If you can pass out that information, we will definitely post it. I will definitely post it on my podcast every Wednesday as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and all those that's watched us, thank you so much. You take care of yourself. Until next time.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.